has noticed that when someone realizes that he can no longer control you, suddenly turns everything into a crisis dramatic? When you say no to something, a problem arises. Emergency. When you start feeling good about yourself, same, create chaos. When you stop reacting to their games, they escalate everything to situations of life or death. Well, you've clicked on the correct video because what you are experimenting is not a coincidence. If you're dealing with someone who's suddenly creating drama just when you were starting to defend yourself, this video will change your perspective. I have researched the depth psychology of Carl Jung to decipher what is happening to them by the head when they realize that are losing control. At the end of this video, you will understand why your growth terrifies them so much, how to recognize your predictable pattern climbing, and most importantly, how to become completely unmanipulable. I will also show you how to use your desperation as proof of your own growth power. Now, this is what most of people don't understand when you think that their attacks are random. They catch you, constantly caught off guard. But Carl Jung discovered that this behavior follows a pattern predictable 3-stage. And I would say that understanding this psychology will give an unfair advantage. The question is not whether you can bear their chapter 1, why your strength terrifies the manipulation, but if you're ready for become someone who simply cannot be manipulated. To understand why our strength triggers his worst behavior, we must first look inside his mind and see what Jung discovered about his psychological structure. This is where things get tough, interesting. Most people think that narcissists attack your strengths because they are jealous. And seriously, I thought so too. It seems logical, right? They see something good in you and want to destroy out of envy. But here it is the problem. When you think it's just jealousy, you try to solve it by hiding your strengths or making them feel better with themselves. And that never works. Because jealousy is not what it really is, it happens. And if I told you that Carl Jung discovered something much more disturbing, your true strength doesn't just bother them, but threatens its survival psychological. This is what Jung discovered. Think about how people grow healthy. As children, we start pretending to be perfect, but with time we learn to accept our defects. We feel comfortable being human, sometimes strong, sometimes weak, sometimes right, sometimes wrong. That is normal psychological development. But narcissists, they were stuck at the stage of pretend. They never learned to feel comfortable with their imperfection. So instead of developing a real personality, they built what Jung called a person. Basically, a perfect character they play constantly to gain admiration. The problem is that this character perfect is not real. It's like I'm constantly acting in a movie where he is the hero and can never get out of character because deep down there is almost nothing. Now, this is important. When you start to strengthen yourself with truth, not with a false one confidence, but with real strength inside, you become a living reminder of everything that is not sun. You're not just threatening his ego, you're threatening all its false reality. Think about it this way. Imagine someone in the work that has convinced everyone to be the natural leader of the team. But when you start solving problems discreetly and get results without need to announce it, its identity as the competent leader crumbles. Your real leadership exposes that he only spoke loudly and took credit for it. The merit. But things get worse, and Chapter 2. The system hears the scary part. I really don't think they can see your strengths as such. Their mind automatically reverses everything to protect their false image. So when you're understanding and loving you, they call it too sensitive. When you set healthy limits, they call you selfish. It's not that they lie. Their mind literally inverts reality to become the problem. Therefore, discuss with them about your qualities never work. You're not dealing with someone who can see with clarity. You are dealing with someone whose psychological survival depends on not see your strength. Remember when I said that we would understand why they become more cruel as you get older strong? That's right. Your belief not only threatens your superiority, but the very foundations of your false self. But this is just the base, because once you understand their psychological structure, you can start to see the pattern predictable of how they counterattack. Now that you understand why your strength terrifies them, this is where things makes it interesting. Most people think that narcissistic abuse is random. They just attack when they feel like it. And to be honest, so do I. I thought about it. It seemed like absolute chaos, but here's the problem with thinking that it's random. When you can't see the boss, they always catch you off guard. You always react instead of understand what will happen next. And if I told you that Yin defined a strategy, there's a predictable system of 3 stages that follow when your false identity begins to crack. Let me explain this to you, because once you won't be able to stop seeing this pattern, see it. The first stage is what I call shaming you for your strengths. Remember we talked about how your brain turns your strengths into weaknesses? This is where they attack. They will say things like, "Do you think you're so perfect?" when you're just being responsible? Or you're making everyone uncomfortable when you're setting limits. The goal is simple, to make you doubt so much of yourself that you start hiding your skills and become easier to control. They basically try to shame you into that you become smaller again. Now, well, this is what really happens when this doesn't work. They move on to the second stage, manipulation nostalgic. Watch how their strategy changes by complete attack on seduction. That's when they suddenly remember how perfect things were. Remember when we never fought? You were very funny. I miss the person you were. When what they're really saying is, go back to be the person who could control. The goal is to make you feel guilty for growing up. They want you to regret it of having become stronger and independent. It's basically their way of punishing you, to overcome their small world and threaten its false reality. But this is what no one tells you. Both stages are attempts to work with the reality. They try to change your behavior through routine manipulation. The third stage is when they lose the complete control. When shame and nostalgia, chapter 3, breaking free and becoming unmanipulable fail, they do something that Jung identified as truly dangerous. They stop trying to change reality and they start to try to replace it completely. This is where they create what I call a false crisis, a sudden emergency, a mysterious illness, a disaster, drastic financial. Something so overwhelming that forces you to stop focusing on your own growth and focus on save them. Now, this is important. It's no longer just about handling. Jung would call it the emergence of what he called the shadow magician. They basically become masters of the illusion, creating a reality completely false that only they can handle. That's how it works. They design the fake crisis to be intentionally overwhelming and confusing. Something that cannot be solved, even by that can escape. Think about it. A mysterious disease without clear diagnosis, a disaster financial that doesn't add up, or a threat from someone you can't handle contact. It is designed to create so much chaos that can't think clearly. The goal is to destroy your confidence and make you feel powerless. Once confused and scared, guess who becomes the hero? They're the only ones who understand the situation and can guide you. This will returns control. What is scary? They don't necessarily lie consciously. His need for control has become so desperate that they have convinced themselves that this fake crisis is real. But this is which changes everything. Once you recognize this pattern, his desperation becomes predictable. And predictable means that you can prepare for it. So now you can predict their movements, but this is where the most people get stuck. They think that just know the pattern and that I understand perfectly. I used to think the same thing. If only I understand what they do, I can be more smarter than them. But this approach has a problem. When you try combat their manipulation with logic or evidence, you're still playing their game. You keep reacting to his movements instead of becoming someone who cannot be manipulated from the beginning. And if I told you there was a way to become completely unmanipulable, not by improving your defense, but by changing your essence at a fundamental level. This is what Jung discovered and what changes everything. The relationship with a narcissist, however painful it may be, forces you to confront parts of yourself that you didn't know. Remember how we talked about how their attacks made you feel that this is not me? That is, in fact, the beginning of something powerful. Let me explain to you what really happens during this process, because this is where it begins the true transformation. First, you have to stop being ashamed of your reactions. When they push you to the limit and you said or you did things that impacted you, that wasn't weakness. It was your psyche, showing you parts of yourself that exist. Jung said that you're meeting with your shadow, and that is essential for others to achieve fulfillment. This is what no one tells you. Instead, to hide from those reactions' negatives, you need to assume them. No act accordingly, but recognize that are part of you. When you accept all your parts, the good and the bad, you become inappropriate to embarrass yourself. Secondly, you have to stop seeing them as the perfect person from the beginning or as the monster in which they converted. Both images came from your own mind, not who they really are. You created an ideal version and then a villainous version, but none of them were really them. Your true self. In reality, you are much smaller and more pathetic than any one of the two versions. Now, this is important. When you commit to make your authentic self with flaws and everything, something magical happens. Manipulative people literally, they can no longer control you. You become in something like trying to control the water. This is what this means for you. Start realizing when you hide parts of yourself to avoid conflicts. Stop defending your strengths and just be them. Use his desperation as a guide for your growth, not as fuel emotional for drama. Irony definitive. His attempt to destroy your force becomes the catalyst so that you become stronger than you never imagined. They give you the greatest gift, the motivation to return unmanipulated. What once seemed like evidence of your weakness, their increasing attacks, is actually a test of your growing power. Do you remember when I asked you if you had noticed how they turn everything into drama when it is no longer can they control you? Now you know they can't. It is not a random chaos, but a predictable psychological despair. You've gone from being a confused victim to someone who sees the pattern and understands exactly what is happening. Become unmanipulable, just like the Jung's individuation process. It is not about perfection or not having reactions. It is about dedication to become your authentic self. Although as cliché as it may sound, success comes from love the journey of self-discovery, not only to reach a final destination where you are fixed. Commit to the process of integrating all your parts. Make sure you're constant in recognizing their patterns and not take their desperation as something personal. Guys, practice giving each other notice when they intensify. Experience your own growth scoundrel and strive to feel complete. That resilient effort always overcomes their tactics handling. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe if you want to delve deeper into the psychology of Jung and how to become truly yourself unmanipulated. Give me a like if this change perspective was helpful to you. Until the next, peace.